and shine, Ozzy!
Alright, Helluva Boss, you're dragging me back in again. I think a majority of people can agree that Season 2 has been incredibly divisive, and that's me putting it lightly.
Harder.
Since the writing change has happened, the story has been incredibly messy and caused a lot of criticisms to come about the show. Some from yours truly, admittedly. However, I think when it comes to writing, this may be Vivzie's most compelling episode since X's and O's, especially since Oops is focusing on two characters that we haven't dived into.
You scheduled me during lunch.
Well, you're pretty good at squeezing things in. But I left time for a big old breakfast.
I really, and I mean really love the dynamic between these two. It's such a breath of fresh air to see another relationship to dive into that doesn't have an extremely toxic vibe. The biggest thing that I love to point out within the opening scene is the amount of intimacy the two have for each other. Now, with only knowing these two officially in the episode Aussies, we do know that these two are complete show-offs and embrace the sexual desire. I mean, this is the ruler of lust we're talking about here. However, what makes this interesting is that while it is pretty clear that the two are a pair, they try their best to keep it on the down low, which is certainly fitting because of the hypocrisy it entails with how they criticize Stolas and Blitz's relationship while in Aussies. It's ironic because that is clearly the opinion the people of Hell have, considering there seems to be rumors spreading around about Oz and Fizz's relationship. You can see how strongly the two care for each other, but both are also concerned about Oz's image within the public. Though I know some will point out that the opinion of this dynamic seems pretty wishy-washy, considering that we have two others that have differing opinions as well. That might be for another video. What I will say is that this is a great setup to show how they feel for each other, with Oz being overprotective and Fizz being incredibly caring and using their dynamic to get us to the next scene. I think Fizz has become my new favorite character of the show. He is a very hyperactive individual that loves to draw a crowd. If this is his way of being on the down low, then I can only imagine what he is like when he really wants to grab the attention. However, during Fizz's low-key stroll to the store, that's when he bumped into an old frenemy. This is the first time we see Blitz and Fizz interact with one another within the series, and it's clear as to why that's the case. Obviously, both sides are incredibly bitter about what happened in the past. While we know that Blitz's is mainly due to being jealous of Fizz's success, we're not quite sure why Fizz has the same feelings towards him. The two know how to get under each other's skins since they have known each other for a long time. Like with how Blitz called Fizz an attention whore, while Fizz took a dig at his horn size. Take it as you will. It's clear that the two have massive hate boners for each other, and with how quickly the two were ready to duke it out, it may have brought some...
One moment.
unwanted attention.
Stolas! Hey there, birdie babe. Haven't seen you since you crashed my club. How you been?
Now, to get into the writing itself, both plots are a lot more cohesive with each other compared to episodes in the past. For this one, it focuses on Oz and Stolas figuring out how to get Fizz out of this predicament. Stolas did schedule a meeting with Oz to see if he could give Blitz a way to continue his assassination business without having to rely on him anymore. The dynamic between Stolas and Blitz has always been a huge mess, especially after the Aussies incident. It's a sign of desperation on Stolas' end to possibly show he actually does care for him more than what Blitz believes. So obtaining an alternative way to get to the surface world without needing to utilize the grimoire is a risk of Blitz cutting Stolas off completely, but it is something he is willing to take. However, Oz does not want to help because he is aware of Fizz's reasons for not liking Blitz. While this seems to be a swift meeting, it becomes a lot more dire of a situation once he receives an alarming message from Crimson. Now, his feelings are really starting to show in the heat of the moment. Oz's anger and frustration as Crimson exposes his worst kept secret was executed to perfection. Seeing how he uses his demonic voice as well as showing the hot-tempered flames as Crimson makes his demands once again shows the similarities between Stolas and Oz in this case. Stolas sees that in this situation because whether Oz admits it or not, the two relationships have some similarities. So he is willing to do whatever he can to help Osmodeus get Fizz back.
Oh, relax. I'm sure your big royal chicken ain't gonna let anything happen to his peppy little doll.
Okay, what about you? Seems your tastes have gotten more regal lately.
Like I said, some very glaring similarities. With the two being stuck in this situation, what better way to pass the time than to continue to talk crap about each other's interests? However, what makes things interesting is the point of view of this sort of relationship dynamic. Now, of course, this seems to be the hottest topic the show loves to play around with because it is something that comes with a ton of layers. For the Stilts pairing, we are very deep into that relationship, and I personally believe that it is an unhealthy one. Blitz doesn't technically work for Stolas, but both have agreed to a deal that Blitz can use the book, and in return, Stolas gets pleasure behind closed doors. Not to mention the complications of this being an affair as well. Say what you want about the marriage being toxic in its own right. He had the ability to go through the proceedings of a divorce at any time. That can easily affect the mindset of the person involved in the affair. If you truly love the individual who is on the side more than the person you married, it would be better to move on from each other than continue to be in a toxic environment with someone you clearly have no feelings for. Plus, you wouldn't be messing with the feelings of the person involved within the affair. So it's understandable that Blitz is feeling that way towards those within the royalty status. However, Fizz is in a much healthier relationship with Oz comparatively. While yes, on the outside looking in, someone can easily point out the flaw of being hired by someone and be in an intimate relationship to be devious in its own right. However, Oz has shown a lot more care and embrace towards Fizz. Fizz also understands the value of keeping Oz's image highly within the public, but it's not because it could affect his own stock being the face of Ozzy's. Throughout the entirety of this discussion, he shows that he cares a lot about Fizz and does believe that the relationship is genuine. That is especially the case since Oz is not married and the only thing he has to worry about is people looking into his relationship with Fizz with a magnifying glass. As Crimson said, this is considered to be the worst kept secret. At the same time, there is a strong sense of loyalty between the two. Sure, they can show their disgust of love in the public eye, but they can embrace each other privately. Whether or not they want to show that care for each other publicly is their business. That's why it is healthy. They show that communication towards each other. Now, of course, Stryker thinks they're both degenerates for sleeping with people within the 1%, but the less we talk about him, the better, because, spoiler alert, both him and Crimson took a dive in taking them seriously. Again.
You had a knife this whole time.
Now stop bitching while I work this.
The breakout scene was very fun to watch go down. Seeing that Blitz does enjoy escaping from situations in the most performative way, it comes to no surprise that he was ready to start a chaotic chain of events, which in turn gets them free from their bindings. While all this insanity was going on, the two continued to banter their frustrations with one another, as it became clear that Fizz really has no experience in fighting. Now, as this goes on, we finally start to witness the two actually talk about the incident that happened during their time at the circus. That's when we finally saw Fizz's point of view of what happened. In his mind, Blitz turned a birthday event to an arsonist massacre, which caused Fizz to be burned alive by hellfire. Look, I know that this is a bit awkward considering that in the very first episode it was assumed that imps were immune to fire on the surface, but I imagine that the fire from hell is hotter than earth fire? I don't know, take it as you will. He was able to survive, but lost everything because of what happened. In the last moments, he saw Blitz running from the scene. So it makes a lot of sense why both him and Barb from the previous episode see him with so much disdain. It's probably why Blitz has incredibly low self-esteem. It explains so much why he's desperate to try and get his own life together, because he eventually admitted that it was his own jealousy that caused the accident, which is what actually happened. While the misunderstanding the two had of Blitz not being invited without Fizz's knowledge was a bit unnecessary, I think it was very well warranted that the two were able to realize that this was a huge misunderstanding that led to this disaster. Plus, while all that was going on, the two started to become more cohesive. It shows that the two were able to build trust with one another and become more of a unit once again while battling Crimson's goons. Plus, Fizz actually admits that even with what happened, he still found himself in a great position in his life after that. And he found someone he is very close with.
And he's got the biggest cock, you know? Like massive. I mean, imagine like the biggest, just a giant, huge, like a kaiju, but it's a cock, you know what I mean?
God fucking damn it.
Remember how you used to distract my dad so I could steal his booze?
I mean, yeah? Why?
Yeah, well, I need to get up to that window there to bust us out.
One distraction coming up.
This is so dumb in the most fun way I could ever imagine. Though I do think this dragged out quite a bit, I can't blame them for making this so much fun to see. Witnessing Fizz doing what he does best and putting on a show really made me burst out in laughter a multitude of times. He is by far my favorite character now because of his expressive attitude and wild ways to drag this song along. Hell, even mentioning how long he had to do this was enjoyable in its own way. Now, this may be a dig at the criticisms of the Cotton Candy song length, but honestly, I like the distraction a lot more because of the self-awareness, and it's by a character that has more layers than B. So it's something I can get behind as the two escaped successfully.
Get your fucking stained claws off him!
Yeah, he's not alright. It makes sense that Stryker has gone ballistic after once again standing there like a buffoon and allowing Blitz to stop another one of his scores. However, at this point, I'd say that I lost all care for considering him as a threat, though what happened after Blitz was able to get Stryker away from Blitz has much more meaning to it. Blitz had no choice but to cause a PTSD moment for Fizz in order to save his life. But in the heat of the moment, Blitz used his own acrobatic skills to be able to save him. I think utilizing that skill in order to save his old friend was incredibly significant because it shows how willing he was to accept his past life as a circus performer. Throughout the entire series, he never wanted his past life as a performer to even be mentioned due to how difficult it was for him to cope with his past mistakes. However, he had an opportunity to make things right between him and Fizz once again. Now, for the first time, someone he knew from that life gave him something he desperately wanted: forgiveness, which tied back into Fizz agreeing to give Stolas the crystal he desired to show it. I really enjoyed this episode a lot, and is certainly in the top 2 of this season by far. Everything within the episode fit perfectly like a glove. I love the dynamic between Fizz and Ozzy, and we really dive into how Blitz and Fizz's relationship soured and slowly start building trust with one another once again. There were a couple of hiccups, like with Stryker and Crimson stocks as villains plummeting, especially Stryker with the number of times he's been on screen. Plus, there are some jokes that dragged a lot longer than it should that reminds me of one particular meme that is attached to this show. And of course, the whole fire debate that's going on right now. and the little bit of a pacing issue because of how rushed it may seem. In the end, with a bit of suspension of disbelief, I can't say that any of those issues warrant this to be a bad one. I do hope that this will be a sign of improvement instead of it being a flash in the pan like previous episodes after X's and O's. But only time will tell.